In alternate history, there are many versions, especially when it comes to video games. The most famous of which for the game of our time for being Kaiser-like, a world where Germany wins the First World War. But instead of winning that one, what if it won its sequel? May I show you Kaiser-like's younger brother? Well, until they win the First World War, they win its sequel, the Second World War, the New Order, Last Days of Europe. New Order, Last Days of Europe is about what if the Nazis won World War II. And it goes pretty dark and insane and crazy. So prepare yourself for some wackiness and some pretty dark implications. Most things go up kind of how the same thing as it does in our timeline. Germany invades Poland, finds and put in the closed world. The Soviets help the German. Spring bang boom, we all know the story. And France surrenders. But the Battle of Britain ends in a stalemate between the Germans and the British. Whilst this isn't as big as a defeat as it is as big as a defeat as Britain thought it would still be, it still doesn't mean that Germany would win. And combined with the British Navy mostly being in the Italian peninsula, they could easily probably lose the war. And America doesn't start sending unleash supplies. This hurts the Soviets very much, because they depended on that, and so because of that, by late 1941, the Soviets surrender. But Pearl Harbor happens, and that was stupid. And because of that, and because of the attack on Pearl Harbor, America still joins in the war. But looking at America was even more anti-war in this timeline than it was in ours. That means they're more focusing on the Japanese than on the Germans. They only later they started more focusing on the Germans. This still doesn't have the British, as though in the Scotland campaign against the Germans, they start losing very heavily. The Germans, after victory, the British army is basically is collapsing. The British Navy is captured, the Air Force, whatever is left of it, is evacuation, and Britain declares defeat. The UK is dissolved, whilst the United States is still in the war, mostly fighting against the Japanese. The war is gonna go on with Rude, as President Kennedy Sr. says how they will fight until the last man, till victory and freedom. As they're mostly fighting against the Japanese, as they got themselves out of the war in Europe. And there was no idea of the American flag over Hiroshima. There was no liberation of Paris. There was no that. FDR was president for 2 terms, but never became president again. And then Hawaii gets nuked off the face of the earth. That's not good. And then the Americans test their nukes after the Japanese test their nukes. And then the Germans test their nukes. That means it's a 3-way Cold War that could end in a nuclear destruction. America lost the war. Germany is the main dominant power over the world. The idea of the nation that would fight for freedom has failed. Deeply was disturbing. But then they found it. The in the organizations of free nations that would defend against fascism and would help protect democracy no matter what. The FON, the Organizations of Free Nations. It's essentially NATO, but for Nazis. Instead of fighting commies, they fight Nazis. So basically just NATO, because Nazis and commies are essentially two sides of the same coin. Which the founding members were Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and America, fighting against fascism, while Japan created its own the coalition sphere that's with Japan as the head of essentially Asia, and Italy doing its own thing because nobody cares about Italy, and Germany, the head of essentially Europe. A Nazi paradise, that you could say. A fascist paradise. Everything going so well for the Germans, with the swastika up in the air. Yes, everything going so well for them. Well, until Himmel went kind of crazy, he decided, I'm gonna make my own kind of paganistic Nazi thing. Himmel was very crazy. Go look him up. He makes like the Indiana Jones villains look normal. But the world is in between three alliances. Germany is the main dominant power of Europe. The world being divided between the OFN, the Japanese Empire, the German Empire, and whatever else. Until the German Civil War. That will, with multiple fascist groups deciding who's the real Fuhrer after the death of Hitler in 1961. And then 2 years later, the German Civil War fully breaks out. Multiple groups each deciding who's the real Fuhrer to make Germany once again great. To make it who's the real fascist dictator, who's the real Führer and leader of Germany. Whilst meanwhile, it's African colonies, all made alliance against South Africa to go to war. South Africa, and it has nothing to do with the German government after that. South Africa is an ally of is part of the FON, and because of the FON being like NATO, the FON with the United States and whoever else has to intervene in South Africa, essentially being their Vietnam in this universe. Thus, the German Civil War will probably go on, could cause the collapse of fascism in Europe. The FON very much hopes this. The FON is trying to build allies, especially if Germany, especially most notably the Mediterranean Union, with them being the biggest supporter of the FON. The FON is trying to free Europe from fascism and bring an end to the Japanese Empire. As the war in South Africa rages on, the FON helps its South African allies against the Germans. Whilst meanwhile, Russia, that essentially had no government, has to deal with two options: the Holy Russian Empire, or the Black League. Both of them being dictatorships until the end, and have this idea of revenge against the Germans. With their several human rights abuses, Russia has only two choices, and it's very dark. That's the TNO universe. And also, Kennedy still gets killed in this universe. So yeah.